Alaska is one of the most remote states in the U.S., in fact. It's so far away from everything that some of its towns are not even reachable by road. And since the state is so vast and so sparsely populated, some mysterious events have gone down over the years without any real answers being found. In this video, we're going to explore one of the most puzzling cases that has ever taken place in Alaska. But before we get into it, be sure to hit that like button for more true crime content. Let's get into it. On June 1976, a young mother named Mary Jane Spears was waiting at a bus stop in the town of Ruby, Alaska. She was waiting for the one and only bus that went through her town every Wednesday, bringing much-needed supplies. The bus made regular stops on its route, and the schedule was dependable as could be. It was so dependable, in fact, that the locals knew when they didn't show up to the stop, there must have been a problem. The bus never showed up that day, nor did it show up the next day or the next. No one had any idea where it was, or why it wasn't on its usual route. But as the days turned into weeks, people began to panic. You see, Ruby, Alaska isn't just your average town. In fact, it's not even an actual town. It's more like a collection of settlements that happen to be close enough together to share a post office. There were roughly 200 residents living in the area. And because it wasn't an official town, it didn't have many of the things that other settlements did. For example, there were no roads connecting it to the outside world, no electricity, no running water, and no doctor. So when the scheduled supply bus did unshow up with the food and other essentials that people relied on, things quickly took a turn for the worse. One woman who lived in the area recalled, "We had about 3 days of food left and no way to get more. We couldn't send people out to look for it either because we had no vehicles. If we did, we would have gone out after it." At this point, the only thing people could do was wait and hope that someone would come looking for them soon. But here's the thing, no one did come looking for them, or if they did, no one knew. Since there were no roads leading in or out of the settlement, the only way to reach them was by bush, plane, or by boat, or there were no planes or boats that came around that time, so the residents were completely out of touch with the outside world. It's hard to imagine now, but before cell phones, if you didn't have a phone line at your house, you really were in the middle of nowhere. Even if something terrible happened, you might not hear about it for days. You had to rely on neighbors to tell you what was going on. Since Ruby, Alaska had no road access, no phone lines, no cars, no electricity or anything else that would bring people from the outside world, it was completely off the grid. So while the residents waited and waited for someone to find them, their food supplies dwindled and their situation became increasingly desperate. By the time help finally arrived, nearly 2 weeks had passed since the bus was supposed to have shown up. And when the Alaska State Trooper landed his plane in the area, he discovered something that he never could have anticipated. When he arrived, he found almost all of the homes deserted. As he flew his plane closer to the settlements, he saw residents standing by their houses, waving frantically. One of the women was holding her baby in the air, screaming for help. According to the trooper, the scene was straight out of the movie Apocalypse Now. It was pure chaos. He managed to land his plane, and as he stepped out of it, he was immediately met with a horrifying sight. 4 bodies lay sprawled out on the ground in front of him. They appeared to have been shot and killed. But that was only the beginning of the horror. As the trooper continued to search the area, he came across a total of 20 dead bodies. All of them appeared to have been murdered. He radioed for backup, and soon the area was swarming with troopers. Residents poured out of their homes, eager to explain what had happened. What they told investigators was unbelievable. According to the residents, a group of men had descended upon the town and methodically executed everyone in sight. The group reportedly wore masks and had guns. They had also set fire to several buildings and destroyed as much food as possible. It was like something straight out of a horror movie. Now, you might be thinking this sounds too crazy to be true. Maybe the residents were just making things up. After all, how could such a thing actually happen? Let me tell you, it actually did happen. And unfortunately, nobody knows exactly what went down in Ruby, Alaska. The case became known as Alaska's Greatest Unsolved Mystery. Investigators worked tirelessly to try to figure out what had happened and who was responsible. They interviewed everyone who had been in the settlement at the time of the murders and even brought in FBI profilers. But despite their best efforts, they were unable to piece together exactly what had happened. There were plenty of theories, though. Some believed that the murders were committed by members of a cult. Others thought that it was the work of a lone gunman who had gone on a rampage. Still others suspected that the murders were the result of a botched robbery. But in the end, none of these theories could be proved. And as the years went on, the case grew colder and colder. Today, there is still no definitive answer as to what happened in Ruby, Alaska. What we do know is that 20 people lost their lives, and that's a tragedy in itself. After the murders, many of the remaining residents left the area and moved elsewhere in Alaska. And as time went on, the settlements were abandoned. Today, the only thing that remains of Ruby, Alaska, is a cemetery where the 20 victims are buried. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about the victims. Each of them had their own story and their own loved ones who missed them dearly. They were not just names on a list or statistics in a cold case file. They were real people who had dreams and hopes for the future, just like you and me. One of the victims was a young girl named Teresa Leffler. She was only 10 years old when she was killed. Her mother, Carol, had sent her to the store to pick up some bread and milk. Little did she know that it would be the last time she would ever see her daughter alive. Teresa's body was found lying next to the road. She had been shot in the back of the head. Another victim was a man named Peter J. Simeonoff. He was a trapper who had lived in the area for most of his life. He was found dead in his cabin, his face covered in a black plastic bag. Then there was Mary Jane Sleeper. She was the woman who had been waiting for the bus at the beginning of the story. She was found dead in her home, her throat slashed from ear to ear. These are just a few of the victims. Each of them had their own story and their own loved ones who missed them dearly. It's important to remember them, not just for what happened to them, but for the lives that they lived. The case of Ruby, Alaska continues to baffle investigators and armchair detectives alike. There are still so many questions that have yet to be answered. Who was responsible for the murders and why? What was their motive and what happened to them? Fortunately, it's likely that we may never know the answers to these questions. The case has been cold for decades, and the only evidence that remains is physical evidence that can't really tell us anything. Ultimately, the truth is that we may never really understand what happened in Ruby, Alaska. But that doesn't mean that we can't try. Every year, new theories emerge, and new people come forward claiming to have information about the case. Maybe someday we will get closer to finding out what happened. But until then, the mystery of Ruby, Alaska will continue to haunt us. If you think this case is scary, you'll love our podcast. Just search for us in your favorite podcast app and subscribe. We release new episodes every week. Thanks for watching.